Good evening, folks, and welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Honestly, what a week. There we go again. They've got it all set for September to November. Another exercise. Oh dear heck. And you can see that they've been planning this for a long time, probably since 2020. Getting everything in place. You can see it happening in the supermarkets. It's just ridiculous. Are you going to go for it this time? I wonder. Because I think this might be a little bit different, given the game they're setting up in the old supermarkets. It's the digital ID that they have to get in first, of course, and I think Stormer has just issued yesterday instruction to crack on with that. And they're pushing us to get back into Europe as a consent, giving it the big, oh, it's all swung now, more people want to go back in if we're to do it again. Well, let's do it again. Let's have another referendum, because I'll tell you now, it won't go the way you want it. It'll go exactly as it did before, because that's what the majority of people want. So, you know, it's wind and piss everywhere. Trump playing what a great theatre that's just been played out. You see, the trouble with Trump is everything he says is you can't not agree with. He's on the ball with everything, but then that's exactly how the plan works. Just like Hitler said everything the Germans wanted to hear at the time, Trump's doing the very same, because they need everybody on side with Trump, because he is the emancipator of the cursed lines that we're going to just discuss tonight. Now, it's going over some same data that I've gone over for the last few weeks, but you need to bear with me, because it's such an important set of data that I'm just always trying to streamline it and streamline it and streamline it so it can be absorbed on its own merit, because it's so important that all non-PCIs understand the situation, because what they've got planned for all non-PCIs isn't good. It really isn't. And obviously the division that's creating this is all based on the fact that everybody takes on the sort of interpretation of doctrine in accordance with the chosen religion. That's the problem. Of course, anybody that just gets off the religious edit and looks at the stuff themselves, they're going to come up with a different conclusion, albeit, you know, there's a lot of edit that they'd have to sort of remove as well to actually see through it. But this is the game. Now, I've just put one up on the Facebook. It's one of the old African leaders explaining very well exactly what we've been saying and what you guys all know about how this blackmail system that the sort of leaders of Israel, because and again, it's a misnomer. You know, the leaders of Israel, the people that run Israel, have got no ties whatsoever to the Middle East. They never have. These people come out of Russia. And, of course, they're the Bolshevik sort of characters. That's what runs it. Israel has always just been a fire starter. Stalin created a homeland for these people on the other side of the wall when he was in power. Now, it's essential, because you've got Christendom in its entirety sucking up and backing this shit, because they're cowards and they're not very bright, especially the evangelical side of it. But even anybody still tied to the Vatican today, since after the 90s, or especially after Vatican II, you fall in for the same trap. You know, Islam in its entirety is the broom of this system, because of the Talmud. But if Christians or people that class themselves as Christians don't start to wake up to actually how you're being played here, the end is not good. It really isn't. And hopefully, what we'll look at later, again, I just really need this message to simplify in a manner that people can readily understand it. I hope you don't feel it's boring, because we are covering some stuff again, but again, it just incorporates what we've already discussed in the years. I'm just trying to compact it so that it's a lot simpler, and then people can go and look for this themselves. Because if people are of a religion, then the prompts that you'll get, hopefully from this podcast, will help you to see past the edit that you've had thrown down your neck since you were yay big, especially if you've been enveloped with religious, I wouldn't say doctrine, not religious doctrine, but churchism, synagoguism or mosqueism, because of course they're just basically these days banks, and they just wrap this emotional baggage around it so that you get confounded, confused, and you obey. And it's sad, but this is the way it's going, and they are pushing like crazy. And even like I said, even though Trump's saying everything everybody wants to hear, the end game isn't what those that support this are actually going to want. And so you've got this move to protest everywhere. I mean, I've watched a few. I mean, what are you actually doing? What are you protesting? What is your intention? What do you think you're going to gain from running around on street shouting your head off? You're not going to gain anything. You know, you're in a civilised country. And what makes a nation civilised is the fact that it's created the methods and means to move things without protest. It's all based on not breaching the peace, as it were, not doing any damage and any harm. And, you know, if you're going to keep going on these nonsensical protests, they're doing nothing apart from separating you from these domestic security forces. You know, you're bolstering we must do something. Even though they're none of them are de jure, none of them are constables, they're all actually criminal in the sense that they're impersonating the constabulary. And most of these knuckle-dragger ones on the street, they haven't got a clue about this, you know. A constable's ruled by the 9 principles of law since 1829. Okay, that's the rules for a constable. And they do not enforce policy. It's as simple as that. And it's very clear in Principle 5 that the police are the public and the public are the police. And that the police, constables, are just members of the public who are paid to give their full attention to policing. It's very simple. There's no distinction between the public and the police. They are the same. So it's incumbent on us all to upkeep the peace, not these Johnny-come-latelys that are now fully incorporated pretending to be constables. And that's a serious reality, and people just don't seem to get it, even though if you ring them, they're not coming. If you're a business tied to this corporate system, they're there like a shot. You know, what more does people need to see to realise that things are not as they'd like to pretend they are, because they're cowards, you know? So you've got this Tommy the Tit running around now. I mean, what is he playing at? So there were a bit of a nonsense earlier in the week where it showed him in some train station in London, and a guy let out on floor and he panicking. And I just thought, yeah, really? And then it was said that he'd fled. Now, I've seen something today where I don't know whether it's before that incident or whether this is today's, whatever. Now, he's talking about this great protest. But actually, today, listening to him, it isn't actually a protest. It's, let's all come out to play. We're doing music, we're doing fun and games. We're not liaising with London and Cain because he's an arsehole. But we're liaising with the Met Police. So he now thinks he's got the Met Police on his side against Cain, working in sync with what Trump's just done. Rightly so, he's quite right. Everything he said was bang on and right, but it's what they're attempting to do with that division that's the problem. So you've got Tommy Robinson now believing that he's separated London between the police who were on his side and the Mayor of London. Well, chaps, the mayors control the police and crime commissioners. The police and crime commissioners choose the chief constables. Work that one out. Where's the separation? Yeah, there is none. The inner city has its own police force, granted. But the Metropolitan Police is the Metropolitan Police of London, controlled by Cain. So where he gets this idea that he's created some kind of rift between the Mayor of London and the Met Police by getting the Met Police on his side only shows you the capacity of this chap. He's not the brightest. And I do believe after he came out of Nick, he's been seriously programmed. Everything seems to be different with him now. He's on a different march. And so he goes from the English Defence League, suggesting he had some kind of grasp on the fact that England is England, it's not British, and it's not the UK. But listening to him today, he was talking British, he was talking UK, no mention of England. So what's changed? And he seems to be now rallying against the state itself, rather than, as he started off, rallying against Islam. I don't understand what is going on with that character. But more to the point, what is it that he's organising for September? It just sounds like a party. What is he? Has he become some kind of promoter now? Is he a promoter for gigs? Fun and games? I mean, what the hell is going on there? But the followers who are just running on emotion, oh, Tommy, blah, 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 blah. He can't do any wrong yet. What's he actually trying to achieve? What is he doing? And more to the point, whatever is going to happen in September, what do you intend to gain? It's just a jolly out in London, and that's it. You're not going to gain anything. Nothing. But the most important thing is he's up and down thinking he's created a division in London between the Met Police and Cain. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, lad. The mayors choose the police and crime commissioner for each city, each shire. So there is no rift at all. If the Metropolitan Police are feigning backing you, pal, guns give it the green light. So you're being played. What are you being played for? Well, I'd suggest that given the kind of people that follow him, they want an almost bursting at the seams that this event will turn into some kind of demented, riotous civil unrest. Yeah. You can see now these immigrants, they're not coming in on the boats. They're coming in on planes. And there's a couple of videos out in relation to Canary Wharf, one of the hotels there, where they're being pulled in at 1:30 in the morning. And then out in the morning on scooters. Now, as far as I were aware, these immigrants or refugees are not sanctioned to be able to work here because they're illegal. Yet they were all piling out on motorbikes, or attempting to, with masks on. So the mask game, again, it's another means for these immigrants to be shifted in for whatever their agendas are that they've been given, while hiding the fact. They're seriously setting things up now for this exercise Pegasus, which they are setting off sometime between September and November. Now, of course, if we go with the last gig, they always do the exercise and then they make it go live. You've got the doctors striking so that they can ensure that the doctors have got more cash they're going to do what they're told, even more than they did before. Given so many of these doctors now are foreigners anyway, I can't see them having a problem doing it any road. But if they're getting a lot of lolly, again, that makes it good. They're giving... What have we got here? I picked up this... no. So now they've got... Ambulance chiefs spend 670k on body armour for medics after violent attacks. No, this is again setting things up ready for this exercise. This whole part of this exercise in readiness to set off this WHO treaty that they all agreed in May, which basically gives the WHO full command, full control over all nations that are signed up to it for whatever they want to do. Plus it also keeps... See, this is another thing. They get to keep the power even after something's called off. So if they called it off, they're still running the show. And I think people are missing this kind of data. But it's exceptionally important that people don't miss what's actually going on with this gig. So this is what I picked up this week, which is Exercise Pegasus Autumn 2025. And this was published on the 16th of July and last updated on the 16th of July, NHS England, which of course is a private for-profit trust. People think because NHS is in there, it's still a part of the national system. It's not. It's private for-profit, and they want your organs. And they want to maim and do whatever they can to as many people as they can, because they can. Whether that's through addiction or direct interventions, it's not now about health, it's now about money and power and control. And do we say it? Cultural genocide, which is supposed to be against international law. So it says pandemic response plan. 1. DHSC are leading overall on the pandemic preparedness programme, and NHS England via NHS Resilience programme teams and national clinical directors are supporting in partnership with UKHSA, Cabinet Office and other ALBs. I don't know what an ALB is, I don't know what UKHSA is, and I don't know what DHSC is either. But all military terms, you can guarantee. 2. Work is underway on developing a pandemic response plan which will set out national roles and responsibilities. So they basically, through the next exercise, are going to reorganise national roles and responsibilities. So they're going to give different departments and themselves more power, more responsibilities. And remember, this all comes under duty of care, a very important phrase. And now the health and social care system will respond to a pandemic occurring now for different routes of transmission. The first of these focuses on response to a respiratory airborne pandemic. I've noticed they've been spraying like mental as we ready for this storm that's off the west coast. 3. Exercise Pegasus is a Tier 1 exercise defined as a national level exercise involving ministerial participation and Cabinet Office briefing rooms. COBR. Activation. Activation. And will take place between September and November 2025. Its key purpose is to simulate a realistic pandemic scenario and is the first of its kind in nearly a decade. So it's different to those that they had before 2020. Well, it seems to be all about exercising and drilling the power base, doesn't it? Which is 4. Led by DHSC and UKHSA, with participation by government departments and devolved nations. I say that again. Led by DHSC and UKHSA, so they're leading this, they're in charge, with participation by government departments and devolved nations. Interesting. So the government isn't leading this, it's only a participant. and devolved nations. Devolved means undone, which of course when you incorporate everything, the nation has been devolved. It will assess the UK's pandemic response capabilities more broadly across government. So this is all about governance. So DHSC and UKHSA, whomever they are pissing around with government, reorganising the UK government. NHS England is a key participant, and NHS systems via LRFs, whatever that is, will also actively contribute. Further detail on the exercise objectives and structure are set out at Appendix 1, which I think we've got. 5. National participation from NHS England will include the partial use of incident management structures, national executive participation, and key staff involvement for those already involved in pandemic preparedness. Focus will be on core activities and agility to integrate with other national level health play. Now, I noticed yesterday the fire girls have been up and down handing out leaflets to commercial properties, specifically Costa Coffee and a pub that's across from it. So I noted that yesterday. With other national level health play. Okay. 6. Executive participation is set to include National Director for UEC and Operations Chief Medical Officer, selected National Clinical Directors, Chief Nursing Officer and Regional Directors with support from the National Programme Director for Urgent and Emergency Care. Is that UEC? Yeah, Director for UEC. So UEC is is Urgent and Emergency Care. A National Director for NHS Resilience. This will take place across 3 two-day phases in September and October 2025. So we can expect then these pillocks running around all over the roads with the blue flashing lights everywhere. Now that you understand that they're private for corporate, it would be like giving way to McDonald's, to KFC staff on the road saying, "Get out of my way," or Mickey Mouse. It's no different. So if they're doing this over 3 two-day phases when they're having their little fit, you have absolutely no need at all to play with them. In fact, if you blocked everything at every point, it would make a mess of the little game, wouldn't it? It would cock it up completely. So again, it's up to us, it's up to us. I've seen these ambulances put their bloody thingies on each time they come to some lights because they're going for a brew. And they're obviously being instructed to do that. So this is how the corporate systems work. Let me have a look. So we've got, it says Appendix A, did it not? Let's see if we've got Appendix A. I think we do. Exercise ready. Where have I put that? I'm sure I've got it somewhere. Here we go. Right, so it says Appendix 1, Exercise Pegasus Core Objectives. Exercise decision-making processes for measures to contain, control or mitigate the impact of a pandemic, including how relevant priority lessons from previous civil emergency exercises and outbreaks have been embedded. Explore the impact of inequalities and their consideration within pandemic decision-making. Investigate likely impacts of HMD decisions, that's His Majesty's Government, on the health and care system, local responders, communities, businesses, civil society and the general public. Examine processes for the scaling up of relevant capabilities that would be needed as part of a central government pandemic response. So clearly this exercise is to put the whole system now of governance and this medical dictatorship in sync with this deal that they've all made in May with the amendments to the WHO genocidal shit. Test the strategic... Oh, wait a minute. Investigate the effectiveness of coordination, including the exchange of information between different tiers in a UK-wide response. So, all this censorship that they're feigning is about immigration, because, of course, that's the hot topic, because everybody's sick to death with it. But in reality, that is in its entirety in order to secure this shift that they have to do in governance so that nobody can tell tales about what's really going on. So immigration is a problem, but everybody's diverted on that when actually this is the game on the table. Everything else is just for the fruitcakes, who have this strange idea that running around on the streets, having parties with gigs, bands, and just having a jolly time is actually important, and it's going to change Cain's mind, even though Cain has feigned this this division and obviously suckered in little Tommy there and anybody that follows him. Enable and support, test the strategic response to disinformation and misinformation. Oh, can we see? So all this wind and piss and this bill that they've just put in on censorship, it's got nothing to do with immigration whatsoever. And obviously Trump playing his little part in the act last week has only cemented the idea that that is actually what it's about. No, it's about shifting governance under the Civil Contingencies Act, and in America it would be the Patriot Act, that's now in sync with the WHO and their complete control under medical dictatorship of every corporate entity that exists today in the world. So there's your devolution or devolved nations. Everything is now fascist corporate. Enable and support local exercising of selected capabilities and response issues. So local exercising of selected. So you're going to get that little freak bitch out, Louise Hilton again, people like that, who cost your businesses thousands, millions and billions even through the last gig, as she had full control of all the police. Yeah, that's the video that I made on the 31st. You can see it for yourself. PCI, definitely she was. Identity and report on relevant areas of learning to improve future pandemic preparedness. So you've got all that's going on in the supermarkets. You can see now they've got new gates in there that are opening at the moment. But let's look at what's going on in London and has been for the last 4 months. I think the Lidl and Morrison's about 3 months ago made it so that you couldn't exit the supermarkets without showing your receipt, so scanning it. And then a couple of months on from that, so maybe a month or so ago, you can now not enter. I think that was Aldi, and I can't remember which the other one was. You can't enter the supermarket without their app. So see London, see what's going to start to spread everywhere else. You've got facial recognition screens everywhere. Asda, you can see it's facial recognition. Tesco have got the screens up, but they're not actually, or don't appear to be using it as facial recognition because you're not seeing the green boxes as you go past. However, that can flip in an instant. You've got all these Johnny foreigners now in all these supermarkets. Foreigners, they're not English, they're Muslims in the main. So that's already in and set. You can see that. It's just ridiculous. But if you're looking and you can see where they're going to play this. And I do think that this one's going to be slightly more difficult for people who weren't stupid enough to take the juice. So this one's aimed at forcing or making it very difficult for those folks. So that's, again, something to be aware of, as this clearly now we can see is an exercise in order to pull this shit together. So that is pretty obvious what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing now. So there we go. That's that malarkey put out there, so we can at least be ready for that. But like I said, don't comply. But obviously, I saw the fire brigade. They're giving out. It was about that big. I don't know what it were, but it seemed to be in plastic, whether it was plastic coating or they were actually plastic. And they gave one to the Costa and they gave one to the pub across the road. I didn't get to see what was on it. Maybe I'll find out that this week. But you can see they're prepping these corporate businesses in readiness to comply with whatever it is that's going to start coming out of the orifice on the back of this exercise. So, but just what we're interested in there is government are not even in control. They're a participant. The government departments. And devolved nations. Well, who's obsessed with pulling in the nations into the fold? The PCIs. In the new trust, the Norhide. People really, really, really need to get a grip of what these PCIs are going to do or intend to do to all non-PCIs. Now, that includes Muslims, Buddhists, Taoists, Christians, of all denominations, even Torah Jews. Because the biggest schism in Judaism has been the Torah Jews against the Zionist Jews. And the premise of it was that the Torah Jews have always acknowledged the Torah, and the Torah is clear that they cannot have a land to call their own until the Messiah comes. So even the Torah Jews are divided off the gospel. They're still not accepting it. But the Zionists under Rothschild and co. said, no, fuck that, we can go nick one. We can have one now, we don't care. We don't have to wait for all that malarkey. Because, of course, they're operating the sabotage, Zevi, Frankist philosophy. With Chabad Lubavitch today being its priesthood. Running Trump, running Putin, and pretty much running every other world leader, unless you see them specifically speaking out against it. So they've enveloped everything, but they have an obsession with nations. And as you've just seen in there, a part of the Soup Treaty is classing nations as devolved, which they obviously are. If this bunch of genocidal maniacs are about to take full control of this dictatorship, medical dictatorship, that's been set up by the WEF and all the other departments, CFR, Royal Institute for International Affairs, Bilderberg Group, the Round Table, the United Nations, and the what's the other one? I always forget it. But it's just as important. I can't think of it offhand. But they're all satellites of the old Rothschild Cecil Rhodes Round Table. Milner being a prime figure in that, and of course Milner's war cabinet, if you remember, in 1940, made it clear in the New York Times that they were handing the New World Order to the Jews. So that's the Round Table, Cecil Rhodes, Rothschild, Milner Group, all the shenanigans that were going on with that made up the war cabinet back in 1915, I think, when it was formed, or 14. And the reason why the members every morning asks Parliament, are we still at war? Meaning, are we still at war with the people and we are occupying the nation? And the Speaker of the Commons will say, yes. So everything's still operating under the rules of occupation. Is that making sense? This is where we are. It's the same in the United States. Because the United States, or Manasseh, and the British Isles, or Ephraim of Israel, both two Israelite tribes. We've gone through that before. And this is why it's suggested that actually the red heifers, instead of being red cows, are Manasseh and Ephraim, the United States and England. Because we're Israelites. And of course, this bunch of Johnny-come-latelys have never been a part of Israel. They are Judahites. And it's a completely separate game. So, that in mind, we're going to go through this document. Again, I know it's stuff we've heard before, but what I'm trying to do is just compact it so it's very easily comprehended. Because it's the reality of the game, and people need to snap out of this cowardice, this ignorance, this I hope it's going to go away malarkey. Because it isn't going to go away, but the consequences of it running forward isn't pleasant for anybody. And, if it's unpleasant now, believe me, it's nothing. You ain't seen nothing yet. And if you want an insight, go and study the Bolsheviks. Study what they did in Russia. Study what Mao did, a Bolshevik, in China. Study what Pol Pot did in Cambodia. Study what they've done all over Africa. That's what they do. They're sick, twisted people. They are the most unclean expression of life on this earth. And they control the world, not the earth. And they've been so smart about it. They are now the benefactors of all the fruits of the earth on the back of people's ignorance. Down again, like I said before, to this wall that was created between the Heavenly Father and man, because that's what man demanded. So we'll look at this document in a bit, but we'll have a look and see who's joined us. And it's just so important, this message, this that I need to get across to people, because, and I'm just always trying to simplify it, and this is probably the most simplistic way I can present it. And of course, because you've been watching these streams for quite a while, you're actually going to, you guys that have been on this for a while, you're going to grasp it in an instant, you know what I mean? Because there are little bits extra just to add to strengthen, to support the reality of the situation. But it's so important that all non-PCIs start to recognise this deception that's been played against everybody, exactly as the biblical script tells you. The world is deceived. Not little old me sat here on my Todd dossing around. The world, everybody in it, is deceived. And obviously the more religious you are, the more you're open to the deception. Because you've been programmed with an edit. So that when you read scripture, you're not reading and comprehending the words, you're automatically flipping into the edit that you've had programmed into you since you had it shoved down your neck. And that's a fault of the human condition. Because most of you out there are humans. Let's be frank about it. So we'll see who's joined us, and then we'll get stuck into this document. It's not very long, because as I said, I'm always moving to compact it, just to make it simpler, so that it goes in and people get it. Because to understand this will change everything, but it won't. It's not going to change everything for the numpties, because that's the nature. But for you guys out there that have got some intelligence about you, you've not give up all of your responsibility for self, your existence down here, to somebody else, be that a doctor for your health, be that a politician for what goes on in your world, etc., etc. You're not giving it up to a priest, to a rabbi, to an imam. You've took self-responsibility for your own life, and you take what comes. You guys on here are way, way more ahead in that sense, because that is the game down here. And the man told us this. The kingdom you seek is within, because we were made in the image of the Creator. It's in there already. It's mapped in. It's there. But if you're taking your input from outside there, you're taking your input from the world. You're under Satan. Satan runs the world. The more you're taking impulse for how you live from within, and obviously alongside that goes a cleanse, because you're following your own inside. A lot of it's still been programmed from outside. You have to go with that to it shows you that that's what's false, so you can cleanse yourself. You're burning it off, as it were. You're transcending the nonsense within yourself. And the further you go with that, the more in tune you are with the image of the Creator that created all. And just as the man told us, the kingdom you seek is within. And if you're not following that, this is your point of reference. The more you're submitting to something outside of yourself, the further away you are from the Creator, the Heavenly Father, God, as many people call him. I can't stand that word because there's thousands of gods. But you get my drift, you know. There's your point of reference. The more you're submitting to external influence, the further away you are from the real game that we're all down here trying to get into so we can escape from the prison. Anyway, Kerry says, love from Ireland, love back to Ireland, Kerry. How are you? Anthony says, evening Sean and the chat. Hope you're all well. Evening, Anthony. Benefactor says, hi Sean and the Wise Asylum team. I hope this shared insight will help the Wise Asylum team open their eyes and give it a proper blast. Thanks, Benefactor. Good evening to you. Paul says, good evening Sean and fellow inmates. Evening, Paul. June says, good evening Sean and chat. Evening, June. And to remind you to hit the like button. Although 77 Brigade, other imps will probably knock it off. Thanks for that, Anthony. AMG says, good evening, Sean. Good evening, AMG. Stumpy Jane, Rizlet, Mew, and all non-mutants. Big E says, good evening to everyone on this fine evening. Hope you are all well. We are indeed, Big E, and I hope you are too. Good evening to you, mate. Are you coming up, by the way, to Huddersfield? Now, there is another guy that's contacting me from Dorset, and I know that's your neck of the woods. And he's asked if I know anybody from that neck of the woods who's coming up. His take is, if not, he'll hire a car and come up himself. Now, if there's anybody down the Devon neck of the woods, Dorset, that way, that wants to share the expenses to come up, let me know. I'll put you in contact and you can sort that out. So anybody down in Devon, Dorset way, if you want to do a share of expenses to get up, there's your opportunity. So, evening, Big E. Pedram says, sitting under Iran night sky at a cool, pleasant summer night, greetings and solidarity. Salutes to each and every free sovereign man and woman. Good evening to you, Pedram. And it's nice to get Iran on the game. We don't get anything about Iran other than through the minds and mouths of the PCIs. And of course, we know that they're full of shit. So evening, Pedram, and thanks for sticking with us. Jane says, evening, Sean. Evening, David. Riz chatters and lurkers. Evening, Jane. AMG gives it, I Stumper, you woke up in time for once. Jane says, I rushed around doing all my chores so that I'd be ready at 9. Good for you, Jane. Pregnant wedgie board. So many Africans knew Idi Amin, Mugabe and Gaddafi. So many Africans knew. Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of them, well, I mean, how long have they been poking the Africans with the nonsense? Funded, I might add, but all the sad bastards here giving money to all these charities, especially Live Aid, especially that Comic Relief. I mean, if you think that guy that runs Comic Relief, I can't remember, it's Lenny Henry, is a good geezer, you just need to look at what he funds to see that he's not. You know, Bob Geldof, we're told back in the day, if he went ahead and used the money for what he was going to use it for, which of course had been earmarked by the Crown, because he was just a Crown puppet, it would cause genocide on such a scale, because the guy that he was going to arm was a suicidal, genocidal maniac. He went ahead anyway. Yeah, so all those that were involved in Live Aid are cursed. Cursed to hell. Every single one of them. Where are we there? So yeah, of course they do. They've had this shit stuff down their neck forever. And it was same during the 2020 gig. It were African leaders standing up, and they were all disappearing. Either just took out the system, or at worst, knocked off. So, not good. Jane says, Sean, don't wish to nag, but please get yourself on Telegram. I'm not on Facebook and get terrible FOMO. Terrible FOMO. I have tried to get on Telegram. It won't let me. I can try again because I now have a new laptop in readiness for the conference. We've got the microphone. Things are looking good. So it's all moving in the right direction. And now I'm sat here going, what the hell am I going to do for this conference? Because what am I going to do that you guys don't already know? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm sure I'll come up with something. Because I've got, 7 weeks? 6 weeks? I'm sure I can pull something together in 7 weeks. If not, you'll have to shoot me on the day, but never mind. I'm sure I'll sort something out. So I may try again, Jane. Pregnant Wedgie Boy says, Judaism is my personal fave of the Abrahamic mind control. Abrahamic, the man who sat in a chair watching his little boy, and a voice come out of nowhere and said, I am fucking God, kill your boy. And he went, oh, alright then. You mean that kind of character? Yeah, I'm with you there, aren't I? You know, and all these people worship that, want to be a part of that. Is it any wonder where everybody's a fruit bat? Except me, of course. But yeah, I get your drift. David says, evening all, another week gone by, no change. Don't they come round quick, these Sundays? It's unreal. I don't have time to poo, even sometimes. It's just that quick. Where are we now? Pregnant Wiggy Boy says, health play is like the doctors and nurses. You remember? Well, we only did that when we were younger, so we could get a sneak preview. We were a bit naughty. Mew says, hello everyone, 31st of December, Action with Sean. It's still on YouTube channel. But here you are. Well, thank you for that, Mew. Yeah, thanks for that. Just as a reminder, how you can play, just don't cock it up like I did at the end and said, I am obstructed, like a penis. It was because that Louise Dalton, the little shit ass, pissed me right off. Because all of a sudden, all these little coppers were rallying around this little shit ass like she was some kind of queen bee. Oh. Anyway, better not to remind me of that day. They put me in a cage, for fuck's sake. I don't know. Right. It was a good fun, though, at the station. Just, Inspector wouldn't come out. He shit himself. I get you. You get yourself out to your pal. I want you out here. You're responsible. He won't come out. Won't come out at all. He shit himself. It was pathetic. The only decent thing about that day in the cop shop was the fact that the guy who were doing the searching were old school. And he were embarrassed at all these little pricks called police. Dancing about, oh, it's a sovereign citizen. I'm like, you fuck yourself, a sovereign citizen, you dickheads. Well, what's your name? I said, I'm not giving you a fucking name. Well, what's your address? No, I've got an address. Oh, well, we'll keep you then. We're going to see a magistrate in the morning. I went, oh, all right then. And he shit himself. Tossers. Anyway, let's not remind me of that. It does upset me a little bit. Benefactor gives you a thumbs up. Huddersfield, says Mew to AMG. You coming, aren't you, AMG? You can fetch your flosses if you want. Halifax gives you a thumbs up. Hewlett says, the Marshall Plan. Mike says, evening Sean and all. Hello, Mew. Evening, Mike. Mew says, Mr. Mid... Can't say that word. Might get bump smacked. Martin says, evening Sean and gang. Evening, Martin. And Benefactor is clapping it and saying, well said, well said. Thank you for that, Benefactor, if you're talking about me. Pedram says, God in Persian sounds as Kod, which is the word for self. Interesting. Thanks for that, Pedram. Because we have to remember, these fruit bats were so ridiculously insane, they were kicked out of Persia by the Babylonians themselves, way back in the midst of time. So even though we're going to reference Persia, Iran and Iraq, we're going back way back in the midst of time. Because now they're all in fucking Europe. The Holy See families and associated unclean people. So we have to keep this in perspective, folks. We're talking about Babylon old times, which of course is the realm of Pedram there, but we're not apportioning that time to what's going on in there, save for the fact they've had this cult installed upon them, because the Shah of Iran, being a smart cookie, because he were educated here, decided, bollocks to this, we've got more wealth here in our minerals, I'm going to keep it for ourselves, and Iran's going to prosper. We're having that. He had to go. In came the Ayatollah, the cult leader of death and suicide. Oh dear. Right, where are we? Right. So cod, which is the word for self. Of course, the PCIs have took that completely out of perspective and have accepted that their uncleanness is acceptable because it's them. They're on their own, and it just drives me up the wall. Them people, they're insane. Miroslav says, "Good evening, all. Evening, Miroslav. Hope things are well where you are." David says, "Anyone Gloucestershire way going up? Anybody Gloucestershire way? Again, if people can share the expense, all the better. So anybody Gloucestershire way." Give me send me a line or speak up on here, and we'll put you two together. Evening, David. Bedram says, God in Persian equals cods literally means come to thine self. Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense to me. That is the basic structure of all doctrine. Know thyself over the oracle at Delphi. Know thyself. And he already tells you. I created you, pal, and you're in my image. But not if you're going to follow fruit bats. Then, of course, you're in their image. And then I'm not playing out with you. And I have to block you from coming into my realm. And it's easy, because you all wanted kingdoms. A king of kings. And that started in Babylon. King of kings. And they turned Jesus into a pantomime Disney character. What utter shit. And people follow it. I mean, you watch out on there and all this, and you've got the battle of the religions, and you've got, well, the Trinity is all shit. Who gives a fuck about a Trinity? What's that got to do with studying a doctrine that's telling you how to be? They argue on nonsense because they're full of nonsense. Is that it? If you think the structure and foundation and validity of the gospel is all about the Trinity, have you had a mental health check lately? It's got nothing to do with studying the doctrine and implementing it in your life. Follow me, he said. Not literally, because he's not here. Follow what I do. That's basically the structure of that. And kingdom of your father, he's already in there, because that's what he said to you. He's made you in his image. Way too scary for most people. Oh, no, I can't do that. I'm scared. I need this. I need that fig leaf to cover my eyes, and they'll save me. Yeah, they'll save you from it, but now what are they doing to you? You built them the game. They don't need you anymore. The kings are off because they've borrowed from the PCIs. And what the PCI says goes. The kings have to follow. You're all sucking up the king's ass. He's giving you away. That's basically what's happened when it comes to this legal system. Slaves. Anyway. Evening, Miroslav. Right. Pregnant wedgie boys, do you think time is speeding up? Well, yeah. I mean, it's not think. It is. And it has been for quite a long time. Why that is the case? Well, if nothing, it shows that time isn't real, i.e. it's only a measure. So there's something's shifting between how we measure and the essence of it, I would say. And I'm not going to pretend I know what it is, but we're all recognising it. And that's all we need to do. We don't actually need to understand it fully. Just recognise that it's actually a thing. But yeah, time is... It's not a thing. It's a measure. You know? And that's a big difference. Where are we? Mew says, I watched it again this week. We're talking about that vid. I still haven't watched it. I don't think I can bring myself to watch it, to be honest. But it's the same. I haven't even... The last 5 or 6 live streams, I've not even watched them. I've got about 10 minutes in and I've had enough. But then why do I need to watch them? You know what I mean? I don't really need to, do I? Excuse my manners, says Ulick. Here, Sean and chat. Excused. Evening, Ulick. Pedram says, Zod, you know the K phonetics. Zod. Okay. I'm not sure I do. I might be thick. Benefactor says, anyone from the West Midlands, Staffordshire or Shropshire way going up. Okay, so West Midlands, Staffordshire, Shropshire going up. So Gloucestershire, I'm not sure how close that is to that. But maybe guys that are thinking in them terms, just send me your email address, lifeinthemix22@yahoo.com, and then hopefully as people communicate, I can put you together. Why not? Why not do it that way? It's got to be better. X as in Russian. Okay. Right, chaps and chapesses. And like I said, it's not a big one. I'm not going to bore you stupid, but just compounding it, making it smaller and smaller. But it's bloody important stuff. Because we get this, people start to recognise that this is what's happening. You're not going to suck the shit out of these PCI's arse anymore, because you're going to see what they're doing and what they intend to do for you, your grandma, your cat, your dog, and your offspring. And if you have an hamster, your hamster as well. They do like to starve people. Now, there's a lot of shit on the internet I've seen this week, and AI is running riot. Now, whether that's because people are asking it to create these scenarios or it's just doing it on its own bat. But if ever there were a time for confusion, I'd say this is it. There's so many nonsense out there that's, you've got to be really careful. So basically, I don't really mess around on the internet that much now. If I want to know something, I'll Google it or I'll seek it out specifically. But going through reels and reels, I don't even go through reels on Twitter anymore. Because half that shit on there is garbage anyway. So you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful what you infect your mind with, because it does have an effect. Right. Here we go. So the lines of Cain are taking over the world, which is exactly what's going down. Now, we have an image. Now, there is a distinct separation between the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Okay, now, of course, they tell us all that Judah was a part of the 12 tribes. We weren't fucking 12 tribes, we were 10. Right? And Judah were never a part of it. Those two bodies of people fought 4 major wars because the kingdom of Judah said, hey, you guys, why don't you come and join our God, but you can only talk to it through us in our temple. And he said, nah, you can keep that, pal, we'll carry on with our own, thanks very much. So obviously these Israel geezers, they were more in tune with that kingdom within. They didn't need to go outside to this temple and these sodomites. And this is what people, I can't believe so-called scholars just don't get this. What histories have you been studying? Now, we've also gone through the fact that there is actually no archaeological evidence at all that Israel actually was in the Levant. And then if you take Isis Raw L, does suggest, does it not, that Israel actually could more than likely was Egypt. And that this bunch of Johnny-come-latelys were the Hyksos. The cult of Abraham. I'll kill my son if that voice in the wall says, do it. That bunch. And we've gone through that. Now I'm going to have to find that video and transcribe it, because I think I am about to join Dom on one of his streams. And we did suggest we may talk about this. So, right. So, now if you notice there, in this particular image, Jerusalem is fixed squarely in Judah. Right, actually it's not. Because in that sense there you have Benjamin. Yeah. Now we know, or at least it said, that there were some are Levites and some are Benjamites that actually joined these bunch of fruitcakes. And we know that the Levites did actually go and became captive in Babylon, so definitely so of the Levites. They would have to include the Benjamites, because of course that's where Jerusalem was. Which of course this bunch here are nicking. They're nicking everything. Right. So, what are you saying there, Neil? Right. It's psychological warfare. It certainly is. Pregnant Wedgie Boy says, can't beat a bit of... not that word. And Pedram says, God is pronounced with a guttural G sound, similar to the sh in Bach or the G in Locke. Okay, got you. Thanks for that, my friend. Right. Now, I know I've gone through this before, but obviously I'm trying to just condense it for newbies, especially. Judah and Israel fought 4 major wars due to the demand by the Judahites that the 10 tribes of Israel subordinate themselves to a God they could only commune with through the priesthood of the Judahites. Israel said, no thanks. We have no wish to divorce ourselves from the Heavenly Father and become subservient to your Elohim God. Elohim, Elohim, as a god of these fruit bats, not the Father, a God, called himself Jehovah. The Judahites are a power base for the curse lines of Cain, and held the seat of power in what we today call Iran. Sorry there, Pedram. They are Persians of old. At some point in history, they flipped the context of the historical fact to position themselves as a tribe of Israel, or the people under Isis Ra El. Now, you know, the Torah is very specific that the Abraham lines didn't like Egypt. They didn't like it. Isis Ra El, it was Egyptian. So Israel clearly is describing whatever were going on in Egypt, when this other bunch of Johnny-come-latelys weren't very friendly and weren't really welcome. Alright, so there's your first pointer. If you start to examine this script correctly. History tells us that the Israelites disappeared and that the Judahites became the captives and sent to Babylon. Some 60,000 Judahites who had been in Babylon for some 60 years. So that's pretty much how long they were held captive before summer happened. So about 60,000 they claim, and then a point of about 60 to 70 years summer happened. In that time, the takeover of Babylon by one particular branch of Babylonian elites, which we can reference in the same manner as the old Venetian Party of the North was run by the Catholic... oh shit. I can't remember the name. What was that big family that controlled all... oh, good grief, why can't it's not coming? So there was the old Venetian Party of the North, and it's been replaced in the last 100 years by the new Venetian Party of the North. So that's one bunch of elites snotting another, because the old programme has to end and this new programme has to come in. Same thing going on in Babylon at the same time that these captives are in there enjoying the debauchery. So in that time, the takeover of Babylon by one particular branch of Babylonian elites, the new order supplanting the old order. Now, the old order would have had Median influence, okay? So what they did, this new branch in Babylon, they invited this Achaemenid warlord called Cyrus the Great. Well, not actually Cyrus the Great at that point. It was called Cyrus, King Cyrus. And they invited him into Babylon to rule. Oh, where else have they done that? William of Orange, by any chance? A warlord come in and rule this lot? I think so. So it's a game that they do a lot. So they invited this guy, this Achaemenid warlord, into Babylon to rule and to complete the shift from the old to the new, which meant getting rid of the Median influence. Cyrus accepted the offer and moved to allow the captive Judahites to build a temple in the Levant. So he became known as the emancipator of the Judahites, and that's King Cyrus. It's important. Now, this temple that he emancipated them to build for him was known as the Second Temple. All right? The first temple being the Temple of Solomon, which, of course, there is no archaeological evidence that it existed. And if there was, maybe the templars nicked it, or one branch of them anyway. Now, under the authority of Cyrus, the captives built the Second Temple and began to implant the Babylonian legal system over that of the existing. And in particular, because the power of the day then was the laws of Rome. Okay, so a new legal system was planted in that area. All right, and it was a legal system of Babylon. Now, if you've studied Babylon, you're aware of all the different leaders, you know, the blah and all this law stuff that we know that this shit slavery legal system had its origin in that area. All right, so it were the means by which Babylon could implant itself into the Levant, according to their gig. The Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, was a large Iranian empire that existed from approximately 550 to 330 BC. Right? So Rome is on. Now, it probably hasn't expanded itself as much as, so maybe Babylon were getting its hands into the Levant before the rise of Rome, which was just an extension of the collapsed Trojan system in its origin. It was founded by Cyrus the Great and became the largest empire in the ancient world, encompassing parts of modern-day Iran, Egypt, Turkey, and parts of Afghanistan and what is now Pakistan, which was, of course, India, before the British Empire carved it up and created Pakistan. Okay. In fact, it could have even been Afghanistan as well. Now, key aspects of the Achaemenid Empire. Founding and expansion. Cyrus the Great united the Persian tribes and overthrew the Median Empire, establishing the Achaemenid Empire. Territorial extent. At its height, the empire stretched from Libya in the west to the Indus River Valley in the east, and from Central Asia to the Nile. Governance. The empire was ruled by a king of kings, Sahan Shah, who oversaw a diverse population with varying cultures and religions. Cultural influence. The empire had a long-lasting impact on language, religion, architecture, philosophy, law, and government in many regions. Notable rulers. Besides Cyrus the Great, other significant rulers included Cambyses II, Darius I, and Xerxes I, the very chap that the Spartans said no thanks to. Right, so you can see a serious problem between Europe and the Israelite tribes that had gone there, and this empire that came out of then Persia, which we have to remember is where the cursed lines of Cain came from. All right, 13 lines of Cain cursed. All right, so this is what we're looking at here in this ancient Persian empire. So King Cyrus represents what? And there's the trickery, you see, with what's been going on in this week. A man is telling you everything you want to hear, but he doesn't tell you that he is what King Cyrus is and what it represents. The intention is to emancipate across the world the cursed lines of Cain. Right. Decline. The empire was eventually conquered by Alexander the Great in 330 BC. Okay, so that pretty much put it on its ass and it had to start again. Right? Which it did. Because that temple were coming. That temple were in. Right? That's where it had its seat, in the Levant. And that's important. In essence, the Second Temple was a rebirth of that lost in the actions of Alexander the Great, who demolished the lines of Cain's power base across Asia. That's supposed to say power base. And into Africa. And the implementation of the legal system that allowed for the enslavement of man, now classed as a Gentile or a Goy. Okay? This system of law, before the arrival of the earthly representation of the Father of the beginnings, which is the man Yeshua or Jesus, was classed as the body of law made by man. So Jesus never said, the Talmud's this and the Talmud's that. He constantly referred to the system that he was opposing, that was running the Second Temple, as the laws of man. That's what he decried them as. Right? And the Second Temple was the centre of it in the Levant. Right? Now remember, the Irish Druids claimed that they brought Yeshua over to Ireland and initiated him and sent him back to Palestine. From that point on is when he began his main journey, his main task. He was a preacher before, but his main task didn't begin until he'd been initiated by the existing, what we could call Christian ethos, which were here before the Gospels. They were already here. Centred in Ireland, the Albion, the British Isles, etc., etc. Okay. I have tried to explain that in the past. In that sense, there are two versions of Israel. Those who followed the Father and those who followed the God of the cursed lines of Cain. The Cain adherents transformed themselves into a tribe of the Israelites and determined the Judahites as the leading priesthood, along with parts of the Levites and Benjamins. The man Yeshua, claimed by the Irish Jews to have been initiated in Ireland and sent back to Palestine, did speak against the Second Temple, decrying its priesthood as the sons of a murderer, meaning Cain, and decried the fact they blocked people from coming back to the law while they themselves were not worthy to enter it. This is a reference to the fact the Babylonian legal system had overtaken the rights and sovereignty afforded to man by the Father of the beginnings in accordance to the correct translation of Genesis 1. Now, we have gone through this, but I'll remind you. The current translation you get in all the Bibles translates from the second letter, Beth, when in fact all Hebrew translations have to begin with the first letter, Aleph. So when you move that back to its correct position and translate Genesis 1 or the Hebrew of Genesis 1 with Aleph, you get the following. So we're on Aleph now, not Beth, which is the current. So when you do it correctly, it says, E Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashamayim vet haratz. which translates the Father of the beginnings, created the Elohim, the heavens and the earth. So far from being, as Genesis 1 would present to us, that the Elohim in fact created man, the heavens and the earth, and therefore are the ultimate creative force, not so. There is a separation. The Elohim are a creation of the Creator. And that changes everything. Everything, if you're a serious scholar of biblical tradition. Alright? Now, Yahweh is not the God to which Yeshua came to present and represent. He represented this Father of the beginnings. And he was moving against one of the Elohim in particular who were claiming to be the ultimate creator. And that shows itself if you look at Adam and Eve. You've got the earth and then you've got this garden. This little garden. In which this Elohim fella has power. Not over the earth, he just has his own little sanctuary. And created an Adam and an Eve and blah de blah de blah. And that is so important if you actually absorb it. Because it's telling you the foundation to the problem we have today. Because these people are making a false claim. And people have been apt to believe it. So from this we can see that the Elohim plural are not the ultimate creator. They, like the heavens and the earth, are the creation of the Father who sits above the heavens. Okay? A clear separation from the Father and the gods. The gods being a creation of the Father are not as declared by the Judahites, the ultimate creator. This suggests that the gods are in fact the fallen angels. Does that not make sense? The angels that left their original estate came down here and took power on the earth, were cast down to the earth. Would it not make more sense that they are the Elohim? Now, this game of we've created a version of man, because of course who's been re-scripting all this doctrine? Well, these PCIs in Babylon. Yeah, bigging themselves up as Israelites and on top, the top chief tribe. When in fact, they were never Israelites. They hated the Israelites because the Israelites wouldn't let go of the connection to the Father of the beginnings and take up this garbage from this Elohim. Yeah? So it suggests to me, and the reason why the book of Enoch was taken out of the Bible is because quite clearly the gods, as it were, are the fallen. Alright? Now, just a bit of a further insight here we get. So we are introduced to Yahweh, Jehovah Yahweh, the Lord God in Genesis 2:4. This is not the same creative force or existence we are introduced to in chapter 1 of Genesis. The term Elohim is used, see Psalm 82, Jesus or Yeshua or the said Messiah clearly stated that his father was not their father, and that their father was the devil, figuratively, a liar, definitively, and a thief, irrespectively. From the beginning, and the Hebraic term is Bereshit Genesis. Bereshit Genesis. Now, who in Genesis was a liar and a thief? The answer is not the serpent. It asked a question, and it too was cursed, and forever to be at enmity, opposite poles with the woman's seed. It was this new Yahweh, the God of the law, the legal jurisdiction, the God of the Pharaoh seas, the bar, which the anointed one, the Messiah, clearly opposed. If we read the text correctly, Jesus is telling us that the opposite of what we've been taught, and is expressing through the Gospels exactly our route through life. The kingdom of God is within. The snake is the energies within you, and the God of the Bible and the identity of the Creator is always a deeper journey within you. Right? what we today experience is a fake or mimic of the original Israel. The mimic being based entirely in the laws of man and not ordained from the Father. Now, the fallen angels taught man, what? Everything. War, makeup, spells, potions, everything. They taught man. So remember, if you go back to Lord of the Rings, it's going back in ancient times, and all of a sudden there was a time for man. It was man's time to be in charge down here. And then we got this bunch of Johnny come lately come down and change the whole gig. One ring to rule them all, blah, blah, blah. And they taught the wrong ways, right? And went against the original creation. I think we're just a little bit. So Yeshua Jesus made clear he was not bringing something new. He was here to bring the sword to the fake body of law in order the first law was remembered and reinstated through the actions of man at an individual level. And that's clearly what he did. He had his disciples, but he kept calling, he even admitted they were idiots. They weren't getting it. The only one that got it were Mary Magdalene. Yeah, and they didn't like that because he kissed her on the lips, proving quite clearly that he was just a man, bringing forward the word of the Heavenly Father, which would then be classed as the Son of the Heavenly Father, because it were his will, his gig. His enemy in those days he called the Pharisees, who cared not for his teaching, as it removed all power they wielded through the control of the Second Temple. Now remember, the Pharisees were Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians' empire was on the sea. They were the mariners of the day. And nothing's changed. So the military-industrial complex is in the hands of the Phoenicians. The Holy Roman Empire, which is military, is in the hands of the Phoenicians. A clear separation to that and the church, if you get me. Subtle. Now, their creed was hatred towards the Gentiles, in line with the works of Joshua. But it will be almost 5 centuries later before the oral laws of man, which is the laws of man that Jesus decried, would be written down. And today we know that body of law to be the Talmud. So the laws of man as he decried, we now know today as the Talmud, once they were written down. But not until about the 4th century AD, late. So almost 500 years after the time where they penned into the written word. Though the Talmud is explicit in its terms, it is strewn throughout the works to ensure the script was not seen as a body of curses easily comprehended by those not of the cursed lines. So it's explicit, and it is, but it's so spread out in the commentaries and the narratives that it's difficult. It's not just compact, so you can just see basically what it's saying. And that's deliberate, of course. The core hatred was mixed with a plethora of narratives from which a rabbi could easily confound the meaning and suggest it was not the overall ethos of the body of works as a whole to those who would question the morality of its teaching. So that's why we're done. You could point it out and he'd go, well, it's not the overall narrative, it's just isolated, blah, blah, blah. And then talk shit about it. But this is where you've got to really get into studying. To fully comprehend the hatred within the laws of man, or the Talmud, as a doctrine in and of itself, then you have to go to the Jewish encyclopedias. In this body of works, you find hundreds of rabbinic statements on any subject matter found within the Talmud, which offers concise summary of what the Talmud is actually teaching. So when you get to the Jewish encyclopedias, you remove the ability for these rabbis to take you back off track and tell lies. In the article on Gentiles, so this is in the Jewish encyclopedias, we gain a full grasp on the difference, according to the Talmud, between the Judahite and the Gentile, According to the Talmud, only Israelites are men. Now the Jesuits claim to be men. Right? So that gives you a hint. Gentiles are classed as not men, but as barbarians, which is interesting, because barbarians, in its origin, is a Greek term for all non-Greeks. So the Greeks, being Israelites, called everybody not Israelites barbarians. So thus then they would be classed as Gentiles. Yeah? The Judahites were never Israelites. They've always been Gentiles. Right? Which you're going to see in a minute that they make that statement. But they flip everything. They invert everything. I hope that made sense. And that the Gentile was and is forever beneath the Judahite. But of course, it's the Israelites that they're really speaking about, but they've given themselves that title in the retranslations of everything while they were in captivity. It claims that the Gentiles were outlawed by their God from the beginning and thus have no property rights. Now we're getting into this Noahide, okay, and where it's really stemming from. So I'll read that again. It claims that the Gentiles were outlawed by their God from the beginning and thus have no property rights. That their Almighty God offered the Torah to the Gentile nations, but they refused to accept it, and that he withdrew his shining legal protection from them and transferred their property right to Israel, who did observe his law. Which then explains why they've been dismantling this great architectural civilization across Europe, the Americas, in China, that they now call the Tartarian Empire, and then assign it to Russia. And of course, who was in Europe and all that? The Israelites. In China, in Europe, Native Americans in the Americas, right? And it was because whatever these nut jobs had was given to the Israelites. So there's your foundation of the civilization we know as Tartary, and it has nothing to do with Tartaria in what was Mongolia area that they're now citing as a Russian empire, even though the Muscovites, as they were, because it wasn't Russia, were the enemies of the Tartars in that area, along with the Rothschilds. Alright? Shining legal protection and transferred their property rights to Israel. Remember, the Noahide Trust is run by the Judahites, who were claiming to be Israel, because they created a nation in opposition to the Torah, in opposition to real Judaism, because everything they do is a fraud. But people have believed it. Alright? So they're flipping this stuff. The Israelites are the ones that kept with the Heavenly Father, the very same message that Jesus came to remind us of, against these fruitcakes. When you recognise the inversion of that paragraph in the fact that the Judahites were never a tribe of Israel, then you can better comprehend the fact Christendom being made up from the tribes of Israel who were never lost, they were lost to this bunch of tits, but were unrecorded in the scribbles of the lines of Cain, so it wasn't mentioned in any of their writings that they were all over Europe building this super fucking civilization, and the Americas and China. Yeah, so they just didn't record it. They couldn't. And therefore lost to the same. So the tradition that was given to these Cain lines, the Canaanites, were lost to them. They never saw this, these people, these adherents to it. So they could only believe what shit had been created in Babylon. Then you can begin to grasp the reality of the wall that I spoke about in the last couple that was built by Saul because his people wanted a king. Right? And I'll remind you of what that was about, because that's biblical. It's Samuel. To separate the kingdom of the Father, the people that were following the inner kingdom, made so at the demand of the people who demanded a king, in spite of the warnings in Samuel that the legal system would be withdrawn from all who failed to live as decreed by the Father of the beginnings. That upon the proof of one's own self-realization and shift according to the laws of the Father by denouncing the glamour offered by the world, would the keys be given and the gates be opened to those who satisfy the law according to the teaching of Yeshua or Jesus. But of course, it were aimed more old than that. So that's what he came back to reinforce. The temple had put a legal system in place that were blocking people, taking away the correct system of law because they'd implemented this shit one. In that sense, you have regained your divine sovereignty. So as you prove yourself right, you're proving not by saying it, but by the fact it's how you're living. And the wall then is something you can climb over and you're out. So we would reference that top to bottom. So the elites are living a completely different... But this is when it were working correctly. What's happened in the last 200 years is these shitheads, they've took that position now up there. And it's not that they're in sync with the Heavenly Father, they've just stolen the fruits of the earth because of the compound interest and the wealth they've accrued by lending it to monarchs. Does that make sense? Right, where are we? In that sense, you've regained your divine sovereignty and proven its reality, and no longer do you dwell in the land of the dead or lost at sea. You are resurrected into the light of the Heavenly Father. You are free of the legal system, man-demanded and administrated by a King of Kings. So man decried this. They wanted it. Now today, that King of Kings would be the Pope. Now, not today, but let's say up until all popes following Pope Pius X, maybe. Because now it's an exarch, isn't it? This King of Kings in this Noahide system. David Dangoor. Okay, so they've mimicked it and shifted it, and nobody's noted it because everybody's still focused to the Vatican and the popes, when in fact 1929 that system was never the same. When the Jesuits were put back in after Waterloo, it were being undermined. You got the Frankists, Jacob Frank, etc. All this has been going on, and now we're looking at the King of Kings. So this is what the Reformers knew when they said, we know they're going to use this system to bring in this Antichrist system. We're focused to the wrong thing. The Vatican no longer holds the church, as Malachi Martin explained to us. Now, this King of Kings, even though we're still looking at the Pope as the King of Kings, is actually this exarch who's been building his empire in the east, away from our eyes. To which the Rothschilds are the trustees. And it would appear they're being shifted out now. They've got Vanguard and stuff like this. The trustees now are looking like, to me, are giant corporations like Vanguard and BlackRock. And the apostles of this exarch are your front billionaires like Musk, Thiel, Soros, all these. These are the apostles, you might say, evangelizing the script of the exarch, David Dangoor. And so basically, as it used to be, if you proved yourself, the keys would be given. The keys were in the hands of the Pope, two of them, the third one being the see in Gibraltar. And you were no longer subject to the shit show. But that's now been shifted. Now the unclean have nicked it just based on the wealth they've amassed. So the Vatican held the 2 keys, Gibraltar holds the 3rd, spiritual, temporal, and of the sea. Like the days of the Second Temple, we suffer a mimic of the legal system ordained by the Father because the Gentiles demanded it as the lines of Cain had superimposed their slavery system upon the nations, now devolved, as we've just seen, and claim it to be that ordained by Jesus. Therefore, the church, whilst not a representative of the kingdom of the Father, because it never was but represented the wall that were created to protect the chosen ones or the shining ones or the anointed from the shit show, was the system set up in accordance with the first laws as brought by Jesus, with the function of holding back the unclean, but more importantly, opening the gates for those deemed worthy. In that sense, as you cleanse your temple, your body, your mind, to synchronize with the Father, the church has to recognize that fact and emancipate your sovereignty as given by the Father. That's not the case now. Now they intend to kill everybody because the unclean have got it through wealth. So they've took the fruits of the earth, not by spiritual evolvement, but because of everybody's played the money game. Because everybody followed kings who were clearly unfit and borrowed money off these pillocks. Today what we suffer is the takeover again of that wall by the unclean and cursed, who emancipate themselves through the collection of all wealth in the lending of money with compound interest to those who should have known better. In that sense, they give themselves sovereignty away from the Father and form a world in contradiction to the way, and yet all the prizes and benevolent fruits of the earth are collected and wielded by the unclean. Then in demanding a king, the people by that action then suffer the plight of the king, who did borrow from the unclean. In this case, the sovereignty offered in agreement and trust in the monarch becomes the asset of those to whom the king is indebted, the PCIs. They want to move it into this no hide trust. This is why we're all on it. This is why. Is it making sense? Is it making sense? So again, we come back to this, and this is the wall that I was speaking about, because it needs to be comprehended. I use the term wall because it just makes sense, because you can if you put it in a physical, you're climbing it up. If you get there, gates open, blah blah blah. But it's not a physical wall kind of thing. It is in the sense that it's the legal system, it's the religion and everything you have to bypass. The Bible tells us the results that follow when God places a king between us and our divine inheritance. We see in Acts 13:21 that the people asked for a king and that God gave them a king. Now I'm using God here because obviously this is biblical stuff, yeah. God gave them Saul, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years, and in 1 Samuel 8, that Samuel was displeased with their request for a king, so he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said, listen to everything the people say to you. You are not the one they have rejected. I am the one they have rejected as their king. Ever since I brought them out of Egypt, they have turned away from me and worshipped other gods. And now they are doing to you what they have always done to me. So listen to them, but give them strict warnings and explain how their kings will treat them. Now, who were taken out of Egypt? The Hyksos, the Judahites. Not the Isis Raw El Brigade, they were Egypt. Again, that's subtle. Very subtle. But this is where they get us. So Samuel told the people who were asking him for a king that everything that the Lord has said to him. This is how your king will treat you, Samuel explained. He will make soldiers of his sons. Some of them will serve in his war chariots, others in his cavalry, and others will run before his chariots. He will make some of them officers in charge of 1,000 men and others in charge of 50 men. Your sons will have to plough his fields, harvest his crops, and make his weapons and the equipment for his chariots. Your daughters will have to make perfumes for him and work as his cooks and his bakers. He will take your best fields, vineyards, and olive groves and give them to his officials. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your grapes for his court officers and other officials. He will take your servants and your best cattle and donkeys and make them work for him. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that time comes, you will complain bitterly because of your king, whom you yourselves chose. But the Lord will not listen to your complaints. So we came into the world sovereign by the grace of our Father. Our calling next into the book of life. Sovereignty is defined as complete independence and self-government. You're claiming your dominion rights, which is what's been taken into trust with the king. We don't have a king today. That sovereignty comes back to us if you've got the sensibility and the capacity to understand what that means. Yeah? So if you want to prove yourself worthy of the Heavenly Father, you are then in a position whereby you come on equal terms with the king, because he's only a position that's holding your dominion rights in trust until you're sure you can come back and pull it back to yourself, thus gaining your own sovereignty. Can you see how now that the biblical script is in fact, it's a law book, and that religion's turned it into this super fantasy, floating people on water and raising people that have died back from the dead and all that. Can you see that they've turned it into a fantasy, a religion script? But it has to be, because otherwise this wall wouldn't exist. So it only exists while those that are not worthy keep this wall in place. But for those who are trying to get past it, you're understanding things in these terms. Does that make sense? So you're not subject to the laws of the state because he's the source of the law. A sovereign is not taxed or licensed for the use of his own kingdom and enjoys unalienable rights given him by the Father. This is our divine inheritance. So that's what's been put in trust in these monarchs in days of old. We don't have a monarch. That sovereignty comes back to us. But you're going to have to be at a certain stage to actually grasp that and then move with it. So again, this system cannot be blagged. You can't blag it. It's impossible. If we go back to the shining legal protection, we find in the Jewish encyclopedias that there was a transfer of property rights to Israel, and that the Talmud has outlawed the child, which is classed as an issue or offspring of a Gentile, or that of a beast. As such, a beast has as little legal right in a Jewish court as did an animal. The Talmud states that if a Gentile sue an Israelite, the verdict is for the defendant. The Israelite, conversely, if the Israelite is the plaintiff, he obtains full damages. Now, they've inverted that. In light of the fact the Talmud conspires against the Gentiles, if a Jew was ever caught telling a Gentile what the Talmud really says, such a person deserves death. The Talmud looks... Now, I've noticed that spell check, when you put in Talmud in, it always shifts it to Tolkien. You're not telling me that's an accident. And obviously, I didn't check that one. Yeah, that's no accident. It did it all the time when I was putting this together. The Talmud looks upon the Gentile as vile in nature, and as such, Simeon ben Yochai said, "The best among the Gentiles deserves to be killed. The best of snakes should have its head crushed. The Jews, however, are exalted beings in the Talmud, worthy of praise." So they're not exalted beings in the Torah. They're not exalted beings in the Gospel. They're only exalted in the system that Jesus called the laws of man, we today understand to be the Talmud. It's there if you can see it. It's simple, but you've got to be able to see it and trust what you're seeing. And then make that become your subconscious comprehension of it. The best among the Gentiles must be killed. So it doesn't matter how high you are in masonry, in your church, in your mosque, in your synagogue. if you are not one of these unclean, so that's not even a Torah Jew, you have to be killed once you've served your purpose. You've really got to see the game here. And if it's not you, it's your children, your offspring when you've gone. The Talmud almost in its entirety is antagonistic to the teaching of Jesus, who by his own declaration served the Father of the beginnings. On that alone, it's clear the Talmudists despise the Father and Creator of us all, including the God, the Elohim, Jehovah. So Jehovah is their God, the fallen, and he has gone in full rebellion against the Creator. The Talmud not only attacks Jesus in the personal, it also decries the mother of Jesus, Mary. One must then consider why there is a difference between the branches of Templarism, one being of the Temple of Solomon and the other being a temple in honour of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Talmud claims Mary to be a whore who mated with carpenters. She who was the descendant of the princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters, it says. It naturally followed that the scribes declared Jesus to be a bastard. In one article on Jesus, the Jewish Encyclopedia says that Jewish writings defame Christ. It is the tendency of all these sources to belittle the person of Jesus by ascribing him illegitimate birth, magic, and a shameful death. Jesus, according to this article, was considered one of the three worst enemies of Judaism who came to an ignoble end. The Talmud says they subjected him to 4 deaths: stoning, burning, decapitation, and strangling. The Talmud also says he is now in a hell, punished with boiling hot excrement. Christians, as followers of the false prophet Jesus, also deserve death. The Jewish Encyclopedia recaps the Talmud's position. A Gentile observing the Sabbath deserves death. It concludes that the Talmud's hatreds were probably directed against the Christian Jews of the day, or the Jews of the day that took on this new teaching. These Judaic Christians, evasively called minit, or minim, were considered by the rabbis to be the most dangerous form of heretics of ancient times. So that's your Essenes and all these. The New Testament Gospels were writings which the rabbis considered more dangerous to the unity of Judaism than those of the pagans. A Talmudic rabbi said the writings of Christians deserve to be burned, for paganism is less dangerous than minit or Christianity. Okay, so minit again is the original Jewish people that moved into this new teaching, or the old teaching, as it were. The Jewish Encyclopedia, in its article on men, continues to illustrate the Talmudic hatred of Christianity. It states, "We must remember it was forbidden to partake of meat, bread, or wine with the Christian. Scrolls of the law, Tefillin, and mezuzot written by a Christian were burned. An animal slaughtered by a Christian was forbidden food. The relatives of the Christian were not permitted to observe the laws of mourning after his death, but were required to assume festive garments and rejoice. The testimony of a Christian was not admitted in evidence in Jewish courts, and an Israelite who found anything belonging to one who was a Christian was forbidden to return it to him." The Pharisees, through their Talmud, gave the Judahites an ethic that encouraged bigotry and thus isolation. So basically, the Pharisees of old, it's their Talmud that gave this serious problem that Judahites have always had, because it encouraged bigotry and isolation. If you're going to be a bigotrous and believe you're better than everybody else, you're going to become isolated outside of your own. But the worst would be that such a stance invited persecution. By the 11th century, the inhabitants of Babylon, having had enough of the self-righteous and dishonesty of the Judahites, expelled them to the west. As they migrated across North Africa and Central Europe, the great majority of the Judahites that had lived in Babylon for almost 1600 years began to find a new destiny in the cities of the west. Yet, in coming to the west, they found their Christian neighbours extremely intolerant of the antisocial deviations they had taken for granted while in Babylon. In order to survive, it was necessary to abandon such Babylonian traditions, but that was not easy. For 1600 years, the Judahites have lived under the rule of the Pharisees, who had commanded all such devious behaviours, leaving most Jews unable to bring themselves to defy the authority of the Pharisees. Enter one of the all-time giants of Judaism, Maimonides, a physician and philosopher who knew that no Jew who practiced Babylonian perversions could remain alive in Christian lands. He moved to harmonise Greek philosophy and the best points of Judaism, hoping his rationalizations would enable Jews to abandon their antisocial customs. He was only partially successful and excommunicated by the Jewish community on the charge of making new laws. His moderation and intellect did in fact temper the old Judaism of Babylon. If the Torah is for the Gentiles, which is, as described in the Talmud, then who are the purveyors of the Torah? Well, which is, of course, the Mosaic law, the laws of Moses. So it's for the Gentiles, and who claims its book? Well, them that call themselves Jews. So is that not sort of a declaration that they are actually the Gentiles and not the Israelites? Well, I'm not making the claim that that's fact, but one never knows. And so there's just a few other pieces there. We went through one stint with the Gospels speaking in terms of chemical Jesus, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, that is the face of God. For I have seen God's face to face, and my life is preserved. Very close to Peniel, is it not? The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be in full light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Well, you look at these Bolsheviks and these PCIs and these that are purveying and pushing the no-I trust, they are the darkest of hearts. And there we have New York Times, Arthur Greenwood of the British War Cabinet, which is Milner's bunch, righting of wrongs, the New World Order pledge to these Judahites. This is why they've got so much power. And then we've got some other stuff which we'll not read, but it is an interesting read. Just snippets I thought sort of just helped to support this thesis, which is basically, and this is another interesting point, around 80 and 90% of British Jews today are Ashkenazim. Following the decolonisation, the late 20th century saw Yemeni Jews, Iraqi Jews and Baghdadi Jews settle in the United Kingdom and then got us in America to attack it through the mass vote of the Muslims here in Britain voting in Tony Blair for the free money. This is how clever they are on the fact that the majority of people are so ignorant. It is a sad situation, I have to be honest. So there's just some interesting stuff there, just to further express and explain what we've just covered. And so that ends that. I'm trying always to just break it down, make it a bit more compact so that it's easily expressed and understood. Because if people don't start to understand this stuff, we're in for some serious problems, I'll tell you that now. Right, I'll run through what you guys have said, because that's took us up to nearly 2 hours, my God. I didn't think it'd take that long. Psychological warfare, Flora Sassoon was well worth a look. Yeah, all the Sassoons. Dangore, Sassoon, and I can't remember the other one. I need to go back to that and remember. There's three big major families that were making nest in the east and building up this exarch system, who, by the way, were also the Jews around King Edward VII. The guy claimed to be the architect of the First World War. The guy who is said to have changed the mandate of Freemasonry from upholding England to upholding the then coming Israel. And basically a bastard in all ways. Who actually were having sex with 2 sisters at the place that I was living at before I were here. it's funny, isn't it, how you get put around these places and it's just there and you absorb this stuff. But King Edward VII used to go to that place. Before he was the king, obviously, this is when he was the Prince of Wales. Nevertheless, his energy was there, and I lived there for quite a long time, so take that as you will. Right, where are we there? Yeah, Florida Sassoon, yeah. Trump is serious, that's right. Pedram says, where are Iranians figure in this story? Certainly with Parsi people note Zoroaster has been born 10625 years ago. Persians were no Abrahamic people. Absolutely they weren't, no. Absolutely not. And there's a lot of Zoroastrian Mithra stuff you could it also is found in Confucianism, it's found in the gospel message, and Buddhism, which is why I said he didn't claim to bring something new. He was reinforcing the original, what should be. So yeah, and the Aryans again. I have done live streams on it, but that again is a very interesting concept as well. Which, like I said at the beginning, Persia that we're speaking of is very old and an ancient time, and that power base moved into Europe. Venice specifically, and these are the banking dynasties that we would class as the Holy See families, who have been forever entrapping monarchs across Europe in compound interest since like the 900s. So yeah, I mean, I have covered that, Pedram. So yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. You're absolutely right. Yeah, the Abrahamic people arrived in Middle Egypt as the Hyksos and caused a lot of problem. The shepherd kings, interestingly, it's all there, and I have covered all this in these 5 years of live streams, or however long I've been doing them. And so I suppose if you've not really been following them through, you're coming to this cold. But anyway, there we go. Yeah, I get your drift. Solvamist says, hi Sean, I'm up early today to catch the show. Evening Solvamist, I hope it's good over there for you, mate. Pedro says, Darius I became Zoroastrian. This Iranian philosopher was against lying, a strategic move to oppose lies and trickery. I've also done a live stream on Mithra as the hidden god in this, and I've also got a piece on the website about Mithra. The thing with my website there, Pedras, is if you just go to it and use the search box, if you put Mithra in there, you'll come up and you can have a read, and it's quite a long report, but you can certainly let us know what you think about what's in that paper. Darius got inscribed in stone decrying lies. Lies have become pervasive in this nation, he protested. I think we're all in that position now, aren't we? My God, and people believe lies, they won't believe the truth. Alpha and Beta, first and last Solvamist, yep. Omega is last Solvamist, Alpha and Omega. Oh yeah, he said Beta, yeah, Omega, you're quite right, Paul. Pregnant Wedgie Board, is that why they have the bar exam? Well, I haven't took it, but they're certainly boring facts and truth, if nothing else. Thanks to today's review, I clearly see where the divide among Iranians abroad rooting for Israel assault on Iran, and we Iranian people inside Iran condemning child murders committed by both sides. Yeah. I mean, Shia Islam isn't the same as Sunni Islam either. There are big differences. But again, Islam again is an invading force in Iran. So I'm not trying to sanction anything. It's quite sad, really. It really is. Iranian people are not from the same roots. I really do not feel ever being a compatriot to Babylonians. No, absolutely not. And I mean, the core of Babylon really was Iraq, wasn't it? That was if you're looking for the core of Babylonian power, it was actually Iraq. But the Holy See families they claim origin from Iran specifically. So perhaps they're the Aryan branch, you know. Yeah. I wonder if Ghislaine Maxwell and the Terramore project is akin to the Phoenicians, oceans and seas. Quite possibly. Terramore. Well, Terra is terra firma, isn't it? More. What would she? Mar-a-Lago? I don't... Because they're saying now that Mar-a-Lago did as much trafficking as Epstein Island. Whether there's truth in that, I don't know. Alariza Pahlavi studied Iranian history and linguistics at Harvard. Was arse. You mean he was shit? Ferdus, Pedram. Thanks, Swan. Time's caught up. See you all next week. Lex says, evening Sean all. Great content. God bless you. Thanks, Lex. Pregnant says, why are they hell-bent on being in Jerusalem? So... way back in the day, I was on the London Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, and I did a lot on there for a couple of years. And I got attacked by a Tory councillor from London. But I'll cut short. He tried to have me up as an anti-Semite, and he was doing this all over the Telegraph. And I put up a speech from the 1960s. And it was the World Jewish Congress, and it was the then leader of the World Jewish Congress who was doing a speech. And I had a copy of his speech, the transcript. So I put up a specific paragraph where this guy said we didn't pick Jerusalem because for any holy religious ideal. We chose it because it was the centre of trade, pivot point, between Africa, Europe and Asia. And the Daily Telegraph website disintegrated in front of the world's eyes. I kid you not. So Jerusalem, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's because it's the pivot point of trade between three great continents. Brilliant. Thank you, Sean Sprent. No worries. You're welcome. Miss Pagina O'Muckalone. Good evening. I've re-listened to this. Our Sean in the mix, looking good as always. Thank you very much, Miss O'Muckalone. Anthony Thomas has always shown gratitude for the immense in-depth knowledge. You are welcome, Anthony. Pedram says, I check Mithra on your website. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what you think, my good man, actually. Terra firma, says LFX. Terra. Well, yeah. Terra equals land, more equals sea. Yeah, land and sea. Well said there, my good man. And Solomon has the drums out. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining. Mods, thanks for modding. And like I said, anybody wants to make it a bit less expensive if you're coming from a distance, just let me know where you're coming from, and if I can connect people together, all the better. So thanks for everything, thanks for joining and taking part, and I hope we have a good week. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I will say till the next time.
electronic engineering.